Hello and welcome to World Panorama, your weekly roundup of all the major news and events from across the world. I'm Teena Jha. Let's begin with this week's top stories. Summit meet between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin concludes amid worldwide controversy. Trump defends Russia over claims of interference in the 2016 presidential election. Republicans call it a disgraceful performance. Russian President Putin expresses concern over US decision to pull out of Iran nuclear deal. Europe hits Google with a record $5 billion fine. Penalty imposed for unfairly pushing its apps on smartphone users and thwarting competitors. Google asked to stop practice within 90 days or face additional penalties. The UAE agrees to set up a comprehensive strategic partnership with China as President Xi Jinping wraps up a three-day visit to the Gulf country. China-UAE signed 13 agreements to strengthen their bilateral cooperation in various fields. And 18th of July is celebrated as the 100th birth anniversary of Nelson Mandela, the man who ended apartheid in South Africa. Rajya Sabha joins the world in remembering the man who was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi in his long struggle against apartheid. The top story this week, US President Donald Trump has invited Russian President Vladimir Putin to Washington 4 days after a summit that led to an uproar in the United States over Trump's failure to publicly confront Putin for Moscow's meddling in the 2016 US election. The coveted invitation to Washington was sure to be seen as a victory by Putin, whose last official visit to the United States was in July 2007.
US President Donald Trump's first summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin at Helsinki, the capital of Finland. After nearly 2 hours of closed-door talks at a joint news conference, both presidents said the meeting marked the first step to restore an acceptable level of trust.
I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago, a long time, frankly, before I got to office. And I think we're all to blame. I think that the United States now has stepped forward along with Russia, and we're getting together, and we have a chance to do some great things, whether it's nuclear proliferation in terms of stopping. We have to do it. Ultimately, that's probably the most important thing that we can be working on.
But it was Donald Trump's rebuke of the US intelligence community that became the focus of the summit. Trump declining to endorse the FBI's assessment that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. Putin on expected lines saying there was no Russian interference.
I do feel that we have both made some mistakes. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it.
Президент Трамп в очередной раз затронул тему так называемого российского вмешательства в избирательный процесс.
President Trump has again touched on the subject of so-called Russian interference in the American election process. I have to repeat what I have already said multiple times, including during personal meetings with the President. The Russian state has never interfered and is not going to interfere in US internal affairs, including the election process.
Soon after the 45-minute joint press conference, the White House struggled to explain why Donald Trump aligned so closely with the Russian leader. Several prominent Republicans expressed disappointment over Trump's statement. Intelligence officials publicly broke from Donald Trump's comments.
Russia attempted to interfere with the last election, and that it continues to engage in malign influence operations to this day, aimed at sowing discord and divisiveness in this country. We haven't yet seen an effort to target specific election infrastructure this time. But certainly other efforts, what I would call malign influence operations, are very active, and we could be just a moment away from it going to the next level. So to me, it's a threat that we need to take extremely seriously and respond to with fierce determination and focus.
Instead of standing up for our democracy and democratic principles, President Trump cowered in the presence of Putin, and the entire world watched and saw that. Trump's eagerness to sell out America proves the Russians must have something, personally, politically, or financially, on President Trump.
Let me try and be as clear as I can to the world, of the country. We stand by our NATO allies and all those countries who are facing Russia aggression. How many times have I stood up here and told you what I think about Vladimir Putin? Vladimir Putin does not share our interests. Vladimir Putin does not share our values. I understand the desire and the need to have good relations. That's perfectly reasonable. But Russia is a menacing government that does not share our interests, and it does not share our values. And I think that should be made very, very clear.
Amid the raging controversy, Trump accepted he misspoke, saying he would be Vladimir Putin's worst enemy if things don't work out with Russia.
I have full faith and support for America's great intelligence agencies, always have. And I've said this many times, I accept our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia's meddling in the 2016 election took place. I realize that there is a need for some clarification. It should have been obvious. I thought it would be obvious, but I would like to clarify just in case it wasn't. In a key sentence in my remarks, I said the word would instead of wouldn't. The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't or why it wouldn't be Russia. Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had. The worst he's ever had.
Putin accused forces in the United States of trying to undermine the success of his first summit with Trump.
We see that there are forces in the United States that are prepared to casually sacrifice Russian-US relations, to sacrifice them for their ambitions in the course of an internal political battle.
With the controversy at its peak, Donald Trump invited Putin to the US. Trump's press secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted that discussions for the visit were already underway. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
To share his perspective on the much talked about Trump-Putin summit, we're being joined in the studio today by Mr. Anil Trigunyat, former ambassador. A very warm welcome, sir, and thank you for joining us on World Panorama. You know, the Trump-Putin meet has drawn a lot of backlash. How do you think Trump is now going to manage the fallout back home?
Well, I guess that this was expected because Russia is seen as the main adversary in the U.S. deep state or the U.S. Congress or everywhere else, because that's the narrative that sells.
Yes.
Plus, since the election of President Trump, Russian interference has been on the horizon all the time, irrespective, and there have been investigations going on and all. Of course, the proof or something one can always talk about or discuss, but at the same time, this has been the narrative. And during that, preceding his meeting with President Putin, which both sides have been equally anxious because, as you remember, even before the election, President Trump has been, or candidate Trump has been talking about resetting the relations with Russia, and he wanted to do that. He wanted to meet Putin, and this has been going on and on. And I was simply waiting that it would be 18 months now that he has finally decided to go ahead and take the plunge. And it was absolutely important, because they are the two countries that the problem between them can lead to much greater global destabilization than otherwise.
Yes.
And therefore, it's absolutely essential that the two countries, even in the worst times of Cold War, they were talking, they were cooperating. But during the Trump's first year or so, this has been the worst case scenario as far as this Russian and U.S. relations were concerned.
And he blames it on the previous administration.
Well, this, of course, this is the easiest political trick that any leader can pull off. And this is done everywhere in the world, that you can always accuse your predecessors for doing something. And this is not something new. But at the same time, I would say that the relations between Russia and US started going down from 2011. And then afterwards, Russia and Iran are good friends. Russia supported Iran all through. At the same time, Russia also supported in arriving at that JCPOA agreement with Iran, but which Trump has completely condemned it.
Yeah.
This is during the first year, you have seen that the relationship has really gone down. Despite the fact that Trump wanted to meet Putin, Trump holds Putin in great regard, and so does Putin. Despite the fact that they feel that the Trump's presidency owes a great deal to the Russians.
But what happens to the Russian meddling of US presidential election in 2016?
Well, one would be naive in the real politic to presume that an important country like Russia or an important country like US do not wish to see a regime of their own choice, or at least which would be neutral to them, if not hostile. Now, in the case, we know the history of Putin and Hillary Clinton. Now, taking out her emails and making them public, which were also very denigrating for her, had done the trick. And this brought the whole system, the American system, into this. And they also keep doing. Everywhere people want the new governments to come, which are generally favorable, not necessarily hostile to them. Nobody wants a hostile neighbor or a hostile this thing. So it is something that if you say that they did it or they did not do it, but what Putin has very clearly said, and which is something very smart, because he is a master strategist.
Yes.
He has said clearly, he said the Russian state has not interfered. He has not discounted that there may be some individuals, and Russians are known to be good hackers as well.
Yes.
So it is quite possible that, this could have been done by somebody else or some other group or some other country. It is not that only this country. So what Trump also acknowledged was that there are some others also to be considered in this, because this has not been conclusively established as of now that it was only the Russians who had done it, even though during the visit Mueller had charged these 12 Russian agents for a different thing altogether. But one doesn't know really, it's till such time, but currently it was great high pitch which was going on.
So between the two world leaders, who do you think is trying to woo whom? And who's the one benefiting at the end?
Well, at the end, it looks like that the first round, Putin was the winner. But at the same time, the fact that Trump has gone ahead and invited him to the White House is a major achievement. And the fact is, it's what we are talking in this din, we have forgotten several other things which have been agreed to or achieved by the two sides. For example, on the Crimea, on Ukraine, Trump has not given in. He has very clearly agreed. On the joint investigations, he did not give in. But what he has agreed to on Syria and Israel, the Iran containment, because Syrian solution in the Middle East is absolutely essential to arrive at now. And therefore, they have agreed on that. They have agreed that their new national security councils will continue to work on it. So there are, and they are also agreed that they will work on either extending the START treaty beyond 2021, or fresh one will be started off. Now, those are very important things. Similarly, in North Korea, what is happening? Russia plays an important role. So therefore, it's very important because, see, the major challenges in the world cannot be countered in today, despite the fact that Russia is a far decimated country than it used to be during the Soviet Union times. It is very important to understand that no major solution can be achieved without a collaboration or cooperation with the Russians or the Americans. So if either of the two sides take a stand like this, it will be very difficult to resolve the very important and volatile political situations internationally.
So the way things are doing, you believe that Putin could actually go to Washington after more than a decade or so?
Yeah, I'm sure he will
despite the domestic backlash and despite the US allies expressing deep concern.
Well, the thing is that they cannot undo what has been done in the past. What they have to do is find ways to develop a confidence. And that's what I say, even if this visit had not really achieved, and it was not meant to achieve, it was basically get to know one another.
All right.
Right. And I think that the beginning has been made and it is good for the world peace.
Okay, so the beginning has been made and it's good for world peace. On that note, we'll have to wind up the chat. Many thanks, sir, for joining us on World Panorama.
Thank you, Teena.
Moving on to the show, the inaugural 2+2 dialogue between India and the US will be held on the 6th of September in New Delhi. This was announced by the US State Department after the country had postponed the dialogue last month due to what it called were unavoidable reasons. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary James Mattis would travel to India for the dialogue. In a statement, U.S. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said Pompeo and Mattis look forward to meeting with their Indian counterparts, External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj and Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, to discuss strengthening strategic security and defense cooperation as the U.S. and India jointly address challenges in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. During the dialogue, India is looking to get a waiver from the CAATSA Act, which will hit Indian military imports from Russia and also the import of crude oil from Iran. The dialogue was announced last year during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. Time for a very short break on the program. News and updates will continue on the other side. Do stay with us.
Rajya Sabha TV's YouTube channel has just crossed a new, exciting milestone. It now has over 1 million subscribers. That's more than 10 lakh people who like and want to watch RSTV. Over 15 crore people have watched our videos. Our online viewers are also engaging with us more actively on YouTube. More and more people like, share and comment on our videos. We thank you, our growing tribe of RSTV viewers. We will strive every day to bring you more exciting and engaging content. So stay tuned to Rajya Sabha TV.
Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. China and the UAE decided to upgrade their bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The decision was made as visiting Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks in Abu Dhabi with UAE Vice President and Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. China and the UAE will strengthen their bilateral in-depth cooperation in various fields and also promote continuous development of bilateral ties to higher levels in broader areas and at greater depths. President Xi arrived for a state visit to the UAE, the first by a Chinese head of state in 29 years to the Arab state. He expressed his gratefulness to the UAE for its grand welcome of his visit. He said that China-UAE cooperation has a bright prospect and great potentials. Europe has hit Google with a record $5 billion fine. The company was ordered by the European Commission on the 19th of July to the fine for unfairly pushing its apps on smartphone users and thwarting competitors. The Commission said that Google paid some large smartphone makers and network operators to install apps on phones before they were sold. It also prevented manufacturers from selling devices running on alternative versions of its Android operating system. The fine is the largest ever imposed by the European Commission and is almost double the fine that the bloc had imposed against Google last year. Google has been ordered to stop the practices within 90 days or face additional penalties. Google said it would appeal the decision.
We will monitor this very closely. If Google fails to comply with our decision, it would be subject to penalty payments. The penalty would be up to 5% of the average daily turnover of Alphabet, Google's parent, for each day of non-compliance. The mission is very simple. We have to protect consumers and competition to make sure that consumers get the best of fair competition. Choice, innovation, best possible prices. This is what we do. It has been done before. We will continue to do it, no matter the political context.
Turkey's state of emergency, in place since the failed coup in July 2016, ended this 18 July. Turkey's Justice Minister confirmed the imminent anti-emergency rule, a move that was broadly welcomed. A draft law being rushed through Turkey's parliament will preserve many of the abusive powers granted to the president and the executive under the country's recent state of emergency. There are concerns that the government will maintain draconian measures under a different guise. According to human rights groups, under the emergency powers, more than 150 journalists were jailed and newspaper outlets, television and radio stations were seized. Tens of thousands of prosecutors and judges, along with academicians, were detained or removed from their posts. Japan and European Union have signed a free trade deal at a summit in Tokyo. European Council President Donald Tusk and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to sign the deal. The deal is the largest ever negotiated by the EU and creates a massive free trade zone, eliminating tariffs for everything from Japanese cars to French cheese. It will also create a market of 600 million people, and it is the first time that Japan is agreeing to adopt international car standards. Both Japan and the EU see the deal as a pushback against US protectionist policies.
Today's signature of the EU-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement is a landmark moment for global trade. It brings together economies that account for a third of the world's GDP and are home to over 600 million people.
まさに現在、世界的にですね、保護主義のへの懸念が高まっている中において、日本と EU が自由で公正なルールに基づく貿易体制の重要性を世界に発信していくという意義は極めて大きいと思うわけで。
One of 20th century's most important civil rights change makers, Nelson Mandela, devoted his life, including 27 years in prison, to bring an end to the segregationist policies of South Africa's apartheid system. On the 18th of July, the world celebrated his 100th birthday.
Where we come from doesn't matter. What matters is where we reach by means of our virtue. This popular quote is true about legendary Nelson Mandela. Mandela was the voice of protest against oppression. A Gandhian at heart, he was a born leader for the deprived who symbolized the spirit of rebellion against racism. If anyone in modern history ever followed Gandhian principles until his last breath, it was none other than Nelson Mandela, who was often called the Gandhi of South Africa because of his human values that were inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. 18th of July 2018 marked the 100th birth anniversary of Nelson Mandela. One of the 20th century's most important civil rights change makers, Mandela devoted his entire life, including 27 years in prison, to bringing an end to the cruelly segregationist policies of South Africa's apartheid system. His 100th birth anniversary was remembered across the world. Mandela has a special significance for India and has been honoured with the Bharat Ratna. He was the first non-Indian to be conferred with India's highest civilian honour. Which is also why on the first day of the monsoon session of the Parliament, the Rajya Sabha chairman remembered Nelson Mandela. Making a reference, Chairman Venkaiah Naidu said, Mandela was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi in his long walk and struggle against apartheid. Venkaiah Naidu said, Mandela will continue to be a source of inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide.
July 18th, 2018 marks the 100th birth anniversary of Sri Nelson Mandela. Sri Nelson Mandela, a non-violence, anti-apartheid revolutionary, was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi in his long walk and struggle against the apartheid. He directed a campaign of peaceful, non-violent defiance against the South African government and its racist policies. He became the South Africa's first black president from 1994 to 1999. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for his efforts to dismantle the country's apartheid system. Sri Nelson Mandela will continue to be a source of inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide.
18th of July is marked annually around the world as Mandela Day, and the Nelson Mandela Foundation called for people to take action and inspire change in his name in the centenary year. Former United States President Barack Obama attended the Centenary Town Hall Forum in Johannesburg. Speaking at the annual lecture, the former president gave an emotional address recalling the wave of hope that washed through the hearts all around the world when Mandela was released from jail in 1990. Obama hailed him as the last great liberator of the 20th century.
In his address, he also remembered Mahatma Gandhi, King Martin Luther and Abraham Lincoln. Obama made a plea to all to preserve democratic freedoms as key to peace.
People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart. Love comes more naturally to the human heart. Let's remember that truth. Let's see it as our North Star. Let's be joyful in our struggle to make that truth manifest here on earth so that 100 years from now, future generations will look back and say, they kept the march going. That's why we live under new banners of freedom.
A special exhibition was organized in London to mark the 100th birth anniversary of Mandela. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle visited the exhibition and met the family of Nelson Mandela, including his granddaughter.
Absolutely, it brought back a lot of memories. The time we spent together on Robben Island, and even outside Robben Island, before we went to Robben Island, it reminded me of our political work that we were doing together with Mandela in the 50s, long before we were arrested. And what we continue to do on Robben Island and outside Robben Island once we were released from prison. It reminded me of a lot of my friends and what I used to do with Mandela. Yes.
The exhibition has been shown in various forms around the world, including 6 weeks at the Paris Town Hall in 2013. Nelson Mandela shared a strong apolitical bond with India and Mahatma Gandhi. The South African activist and former President Nelson Mandela helped end apartheid and was a global advocate for human rights. A member of the African National Congress Party beginning in the 1940s, he was a leader of both peaceful protests and armed resistance against the white minority's oppressive regime in a racially divided South Africa. His actions landed him in prison for nearly 3 decades and made him the face of the anti-apartheid movement both within his country and internationally. Released in 1990, he participated in the eradication of apartheid and in 1994 became the first black president of South Africa. The Gandhian philosophy was one of the driving forces behind Nelson Mandela's lifelong anti-apartheid movement. He remained a devoted champion for peace and social justice in his own country as well as around the world until his death in 2013 at the age of 95. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Fancied a dab at being Iron Man? Now you can. A jet suit created by a British former commodities trader has gone on sale in a London department store with a hefty price tag of £340,000. Made up of 5 miniature jet engines mounted on the pilot's arms and back, and also electronics and 3D printed parts, the suit is made by Gravity Industries. Here's a sneak peek of the jet suit. You enjoy the visuals as we take your leave. Thanks for your time.